Engines roar against a cold April wind as 16 American B-25 bombers sit packed on the deck of the USS Hornet, machines far too large to ever belong on an aircraft carrier. Sailors stare in disbelief. Pilots tighten their gloves. Every man on board knows that what they're about to attempt has never been done before. Just 4 months earlier, Japan struck Pearl Harbor and believed the United States was broken, humiliated, defeated, too scared to fight back. Tokyo slept peacefully that night, convinced the war was already won. But they were wrong, because in the next few minutes, these bombers would rise from the sea and fly straight into the heart of Japan, delivering a message louder than any explosion. America was only getting started, and the world was about to change forever. After Pearl Harbor, everything felt hopeless. Japan's empire stretched across the Pacific like a shadow, swallowing everything in its path. Cities fell. Bases collapsed. American morale was at its lowest point in decades. People whispered that Japan was unstoppable. Even U.S. commanders knew they needed something, anything, to shift momentum. That's when a daring idea began forming in the background, almost too insane to even consider. What if American bombers could strike Japan itself? No one had ever tried it. No one even knew if it was physically possible. But one man, Lieutenant Colonel James Doolittle, didn't hesitate for a second. He stepped forward, ready to gamble his life and the lives of his men on a mission that sounded suicidal on paper. This is the story of courage born from desperation, of men who faced impossible odds and still took off into the unknown. And if you love real stories where bravery rewrites history, make sure to subscribe, because today's mission will show you how one risky decision changed the entire war. In the dark months following Pearl Harbor, America found itself searching for a way, any way, to shift the tide of a war that seemed overwhelmingly against them. Japan had swept across the Pacific with terrifying speed, capturing territory after territory while America was still trying to recover from a devastating surprise attack. Defense officials knew they needed a plan that would do more than strike a target. It needed to strike Japan's confidence. That's when a wild, almost laughable idea surfaced: launching medium-sized B-25 bombers from the deck of an aircraft carrier. These planes weren't meant for short takeoffs. They needed long runways, wide open fields, and plenty of space. On a carrier, they'd barely have a few hundred feet before the ocean swallowed them whole. Many military leaders dismissed the idea immediately. Too big, too heavy, too dangerous. Even if they took off successfully, they wouldn't have enough fuel to return to the carrier. It sounded like a mission designed for failure. But buried within this impossible dream was a spark of hope, because a mission this bold, if successful, could shock the Japanese high command and lift American spirits instantly. All they needed was someone fearless enough to lead it. Once the mission was approved, the impossible began to take shape in the most unlikely place: a quiet airfield in Florida, where volunteer crews gathered without knowing the full danger of what they'd signed up for. The pilots, handpicked for their skill and steady nerves, quickly realized this wasn't ordinary training. Instructors marked a tiny rectangle on the runway, just a few hundred feet long, and told the men, "This is your new takeoff distance." The pilots stared at it, stunned. B-25 bombers were never meant to leave the ground so fast, yet day after day, they pushed themselves to launch within that cramped space. Engines roared, tires screamed, and every successful liftoff felt like breaking the laws of physics. And the planes themselves had to transform. Mechanics stripped them of anything that added extra weight: armor, unnecessary equipment, even the rear guns, which were replaced with painted broomsticks to fake defense. Additional fuel tanks were crammed into tight spaces, giving the aircraft the range they needed, barely. Meanwhile, aboard the USS Hornet, sailors watched in awe as enormous bombers were hauled onto the deck, dwarfing every aircraft normally stationed there. To them, this mission didn't just seem risky, it seemed unreal. But Doolittle's men kept practicing, refusing to let fear interrupt their focus. Every takeoff brought them one step closer to rewriting history. By mid-April 1942, the USS Hornet and its escort ships were carving a path across the Pacific, carrying 16 bombers and the 80 men who would fly them. The mood aboard the carrier was tense but electric. Everyone understood they were moving towards something historic. But fate intervened earlier than anyone expected. On the morning of April 18th, the task force was spotted by a Japanese patrol boat. That single moment forced an impossible choice. Launch the mission immediately, hundreds of miles farther from Japan than planned, or turn back and forfeit everything. Doolittle didn't hesitate. Even knowing the early launch meant the bombers would almost certainly run out of fuel before they could reach safe landing zones in China, he gave the order to proceed. Crews climbed into their planes, quiet but resolute, understanding fully that they might not return alive. The deck of the Hornet pitched in the waves as the first bomber taxied forward. Sailors lined the edges, shielding their eyes from the wind, watching with nerves pulled tight as the engines screamed to full power. Then, with only the ocean ahead, the first B-25 raced down the deck and leapt into the sky. One by one, all 16 followed, men flying straight toward danger with nothing but courage to carry them through. As the bombers crossed the vast stretch of blue toward Japan, the crews had hours to sit with their thoughts. The hum of the engines was steady, but the weight of the mission pressed on every man. They flew low over the water to avoid detection, rising only when they neared the Japanese coastline. And then, at last, the moment arrived, the first sight of Japan. Cities, factories, rail lines, and neighborhoods unfolded beneath them. For the Japanese people, the sudden roar of unfamiliar aircraft caused confusion. Many assumed the planes were their own. After all, who would believe American bombers could reach the Japanese mainland? Doolittle's lead aircraft broke through the clouds directly over Tokyo. Anti-aircraft guns scrambled to react, their operators stunned that enemy bombers were overhead. Sirens wailed too late. Doolittle released his bombs, striking factories and military installations. Other crews spread out across Tokyo, Yokohama, Nagoya, and Kobe, hitting docks, warehouses, oil tanks, and industrial targets. The physical damage was relatively limited, but the psychological impact was enormous. Japan's leadership had assured its people that the homeland was untouchable, that the war would never reach their streets. Now smoke curled above the cities, and that illusion shattered. Civilians looked up in disbelief as the American aircraft thundered past, some waving in confusion, others running for shelter. Japanese military officers were furious, scrambling to locate the bombers and demanding answers as to how such a breach could have happened. But the B-25s were already speeding away, climbing toward the coastline and the long, uncertain journey toward China. They had done what no one thought possible. They struck the heart of Japan and lived to escape the sky above it. For the first time in the war, Japan felt vulnerable. And for the first time since Pearl Harbor, America felt a spark of hope. As the bombers turned away from Japan, the relief of a successful strike quickly gave way to a harsher reality. They had launched hundreds of miles early, burning precious fuel just to reach their targets. Now, every crew faced the same grim question. Would they have enough fuel to even reach China? The skies darkened as night approached, and strong headwinds pushed against them, draining their tanks faster than expected. One by one, the pilots realized they would not make it to any prepared landing fields. Their only choices were to crash land in rough terrain or bail out into the unknown. Doolittle was the first to jump. His crew followed, leaping into stormy darkness over China with no certainty of survival. Other crews crash-landed in rice fields or near coastal villages, their planes breaking apart on impact. Despite the danger, many Chinese civilians risked their lives to help the Americans, hiding them from Japanese troops and guiding them to safety. But not all were fortunate. Several crew members were captured by Japanese forces. They were interrogated, tortured, and in some cases executed, becoming tragic symbols of the mission's heavy cost. Back in America, news of the raid spread quickly, lifting national morale to heights unseen since the war began. Yet the men who carried out the mission knew the truth. Their victory had been paid for with blood, fear, sacrifice, and the lives of comrades who never made it home. The Doolittle Raiders had struck a powerful blow, but the price they paid would echo long after the smoke cleared. In the days following the raid, the Japanese high command gathered in urgent meetings, stunned by what had happened. For months, they had believed their homeland was beyond reach, protected by distance and dominance at sea. But the Doolittle Raid shattered that belief completely. If American bombers could appear over Tokyo this early in the war, what might they do a year from now? This single, unexpected attack triggered a wave of fear through Japan's military leadership, forcing them to rethink their entire strategy. They realized they needed to eliminate the American aircraft carriers, the very carriers that made the raid possible, before the U.S. grew stronger. That fear pushed Japan into a bold but dangerous decision: launch an ambitious offensive in the Central Pacific and lure the U.S. Navy into a decisive battle. Their chosen target was Midway Atoll. It was meant to be the knockout blow, the moment Japan crushed American naval power once and for all. But instead, the Battle of Midway became the turning point of the entire war, ending with Japan losing 4 aircraft carriers and hundreds of irreplaceable pilots. The spark that lit this chain reaction was the Doolittle Raid. Meanwhile, in the United States, the raid became a symbol of resilience. Newspapers celebrated the daring mission and morale soared. For a nation still grieving Pearl Harbor, it was proof that America could strike back, adapt, and push forward. The raid did not win the war on its own, but it changed the psychology of both nations. It taught Japan that the U.S. would not be intimidated, and taught America that courage could rewrite destiny. In the end, the Doolittle Raid was far more than a daring mission. It was a message written across the sky. A message that told Japan their victories were temporary, that their domination was not guaranteed, and that America's fighting spirit was only beginning to rise. Those 16 bombers didn't just hit factories or airfields. They struck directly at the heart of Japan's confidence and ignited a shift in momentum that would shape the rest of the war. And for the United States, still wounded from Pearl Harbor, the raid became a spark of hope, a reminder that courage, ingenuity, and determination could overcome even the darkest moments. Every man who took part in the mission carried the weight of that message. Some returned home as heroes, others never made it back, and a few paid with their freedom and their lives. But together, they proved something powerful: that even in impossible circumstances, brave decisions can reshape the course of history. If this story moved you, inspired you, or opened your eyes to a chapter of history often overlooked, make sure to subscribe. On this channel, we bring you real events and real people whose choices change the world. And if you'd like to see the next part of this journey, let me know in the comments if we should cover the Battle of Midway, the direct consequence of this raid, and one of the greatest turning points in the entire Pacific War.